These days, sharing knowledge is required to have successful teamwork. Question is, where does that leave the individual contributor? In the old command and control structure, if a person had certain specialized knowledge, they would work to protect that knowledge and only give it out sparingly. However, long before that, Alexander the Great said, remember, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. Each individual's actions do matter today. It's not just the individual, it's their beliefs that matter. Karen West said, leaders need to be clear about what it is they believe in, and then be equally clear about how to translate that into action. Today you're in for a special treat because I'm going to share with you not one, but two examples that will show you all about how beliefs and assumptions affect team members, particularly in regards to sharing knowledge. You have to share knowledge to be an effective team member these days. I'm also going to talk about what the experts have to say about this and share with you some recent research, current research about sharing knowledge. Think about the beliefs and assumptions that people have. Why do these matter? Because your beliefs and your assumptions can be right for one situation and wrong for another. Beliefs and assumptions create actually a kind of a filter. A filter is not necessarily a bad thing. Think about it. We have so much information bombarding us from every direction. If we did not have a filter, we would not be able to function. However, sometimes a situation changes, so we need to change that filter, really. My professor, Igor Ansoff, when I got my doctorate, talked about three different filters: the power filter, the surveillance filter, and the mentality filter. The power filter kicks in because a person's in a certain position. They can actually, he said he witnessed this, where they will take action they really believe is helping that company, but what they're really doing is just protecting their own power base. Then there's the surveillance filter. This is the filter that's there when you look out into the environment to see what's happening. And if it's too narrow, you're going to miss opportunities. Then finally there's the mentality filter. If you've been a manager in a company for a while, you've learned what works and what doesn't work, and so you have this filter that can be really effective until things change. Then it isn't. Another expert, Peter Senge, talked about these constructs in slightly different manner. He called it a mental model. He said that a mental model can be so ingrained in a person that it really affects what you see out there in the world. He talked about what happened when quantum mechanics first came into existence. That these classical physicists would hear all this information about all these different experiments that did not agree with their view, but they just disregarded it. It did not fit their mental model. So that's something to be aware of. I'm going to talk about a research study that I thought was really interesting in terms of helping us with managing knowledge resources. There's two things I think you could benefit from on that. The one point is that what this study showed was that companies or organizations, there's certain information that needs to be encoded and stored, cataloged a certain way so that other people later on can access it and benefit from it. The second thing I think you could benefit from is that they learned also that there's other information that just changes very quickly. And what they said was that it's better to probably a lot better to know who you can go to for that information rather than being too attached to that particular information. I'm going to give you kind of a goofy example. Let's say you're a time traveler and you're coming to a company that's been in existence for 200 years at least. The thing is, you don't know exactly what time you're stopping. But you know the person to go to there to talk to about how you communicate is Jimmy. If that time machine stops you in, I don't know, around the 1800s, then your communication, Jimmy would tell you, okay, send a telegram. However, if you're stopping in the present day, Jimmy would probably say, well, send a text message. So in other words, the specific information changed, but the resource was the same. Another research study involved 141 knowledge-intensive teams. What they wanted to know is, how does competition within teams affect their ability to share knowledge? What they found was that friendly competition was helpful. I believe it's because it brought out the best in people. However, cutthroat competition did not work. Wasn't useful. Now let's just go over what I think are 3 points that we should know up to this point in the talk. Number 1, it's important to consider your beliefs and assumptions from time to time to see if you need to change your mental model or your mental view of the world. Number 2, you can benefit from thinking about knowledge in terms of how you reward it. In other words, you want to reward people for handling knowledge and sharing knowledge in ways that move the organization forward. And the third thing you need to think about, I can't remember, so I guess I'll just continue. Let's get into the examples now. My first example of shared knowledge is, there's a woman that wrote the story. It's a fictional, all of it's fictional. She is a consultant. Her name is Carol Borman. She has worked in over 90 different organizations in 19 countries. So she has a lot of experience. And she wrote this to help us understand about shared knowledge and the impact of it on an organization. The main character of this story, her name is Dot. She's a clerical worker, and she's been asked to serve on a task force team at this major conglomerate by the CEO. His name is Mr. Biggins. Actually, this story takes place in 3 different sets, 3 different locations, so this will probably help you. First is the conference room of the large conglomerate. Then there's the ventilation shaft of the conglomerate. This is where most of the action takes place. And then the third place is down deep in the derelict ventilation shafts. And down in there, there's yet another set of characters. At each of these places, there's different characters. Dot is very nervous about serving on this task force team. They've been meeting for 3 weeks. There's a lot of 6-figure income types that are snappy dressers on the team. They've been meeting for 3 weeks, and during that time, they have just defended their turf, bragged about their accomplishments, and they haven't gotten anywhere. They haven't even talked about the problems yet. She feels very intimidated by these people, and she's stressing about it because she doesn't want to be fired. This is Friday night. She's in this conference room. She's sitting there at this table, and she's talking to a bonsai tree, a little tree in a dish. She says to the tree, "What should I do?" And the tree said, "Go to the bar and open the refrigerator." So she does. She opens the refrigerator, and out pops this holographic man. He's purple, in a purple outfit. His name is Jack Smiles. He's a recruiter for the ventilation shaft region. And he wants Dot to come down into the ventilation shaft. So she does, and she takes the bonsai tree. Down there, she met another guy. His name was Mr. Granfeller. He's the president in the ventilation shaft, not Mr. Biggins. When she meets Mr. Granfeller, he says, Dot, you've got to help me with the very important problem that's been vexing the whole company, I mean the ventilation shaft company. This problem is that there's a man running around, a demon, and he keeps zipping around, leaving these coded messages everywhere. We don't know what they mean. We want you to figure out what they mean. And some people are also seeing ghosts here and there. You've got to help us. Dot did not know what to do, but she thought, well, what I probably better do is meet all the team members, all the people involved in this, and talk to them individually to see if I can get some clues about this problem and see if I can get any information to move this forward. These people, or characters I mean, they're very eccentric. And they each have their own turf, and they're very protective of it. As a result, Dot talks to each and every one of them, and she doesn't know what she did. At the end of it, they really don't tell her anything useful. So she went back to Mr. Granfeller, the CEO, and told him about it, and he said, well, let's call a meeting and have everyone sit around the conference room, which they did, and had Dot sit at the head of the table. Dot is really scared. Again, she consults the bonsai tree. What should I say? The bonsai tree said, tell them the story about the circus. So she started to tell the story about the circus. She said there was 14 acrobats that did an act, a circus act. Oh, and then one of the people sitting around the table, his name was the Admiral. He was actually a pig. He was kind of short, but he was very proper. He did things this very regimented, military-style way. Anyway, he remembered, and he wanted to explain to everybody about it. So Dot said, well, tell everybody about it. He said, this happened on July 4th, 1978, here in the main ventilation shaft area. There was a circus act that they did 3 different performances. It was amazing. It was totally dark. Then a spotlight came out and shone on this man that came out there on a 2-wheeled bicycle. Then 2 acrobats piled on top, then 3, then 4. Then first thing you know is they were 29 feet high in the air. They looked something like that, not exactly, but and they started to pedal around the ventilation shaft. Wow, it was amazing. The other people sitting on the conference table said, so? Dot said, so? What do you think would happen if the girl down there on the first level there started thinking, well, so why don't I ever get promoted? Why don't I ever get to go to the next level? She started thinking thoughts like that and feeling a lot of anxiety and fear. And eventually, she stopped thinking about supporting the people above her, decided that if she wouldn't even keep her job at all, she better hang on with both hands. What do you think would happen then? Dot said, well, they would all crash to the ground, the bike would fall over. And what do you think would happen to the girl? No one would trust her again. She'd probably be kicked off the team. And someone else sitting around the conference table, she was Mrs. Pearperson, she interrupted and she said, no, they would not. They would show her immense sympathy because she had such deep-seated feelings of insecurity. They would give her their undying support. Wow. So Dot whispered to the bonsai tree, well, that was good. Then, well, it really was good because it started to break the ice so that everyone sitting there started to share with the others how they felt about certain things and what was going on. It broke the ice, it got them talking to each other. In fact, eventually Dot was able to convince them to agree to cooperate, start working together. She went back and she told Mr. Granfeller about this, and he was in shock. He couldn't believe it. In fact, another team member, his name was Honk. He was an alien, but he was on the team. And usually he didn't speak up or anything because he knew people would see him as being different and he didn't want to stand out. But he decided, okay, I'm going to speak up more because what I have to say might be important. So this was great progress that they had made. However, Dot still had not solved the mystery about the demon, the ghost, and the coded messages. I should tell you, one of the coded messages said, K is not equal to AU. Think milk instead. Nobody knew what this meant. It was just perplexing. Everyone wanted to know, but it was up to Dot. And so she knew she was going to have to go further down into the ventilation shaft to find the answer. It was scary down there. No one would go with her. She, in fact, was going to have to go where no one had gone before. So she did. She went further down in there. When she got to a certain point, she met a gentleman named Roscoe. He said, Mr. Grandfeller is not the president here. We have another president. Shortly after that, all these grandfatherly types just swooped around her. And then they said to her, what are you doing here? And Dot said, well, I have this coded message and I'm trying to return it to its rightful owner. They said, well, who would that be? She said, well, I don't know. But he zips around and he leaves these messages everywhere. Then they knew she was talking about the demon. Whoa, that coded message got Dot in a lot of trouble. They said, you're going to be tried before the court. I said, what? Why? Because you've already admitted to trafficking in coded messages and seeking a liaison with a known subversive. This falls under the heading of conspiracy to introduce change into Sector 19, which is traceable. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. Then eventually she was taken before the court so she could be tried. They said to her, well, do you have a lawyer? She said, well, I didn't have time to get one. They said, well, let's see if anybody here wants to represent you. Nobody did. The judge was just about to pronounce her judgment and her execution when way in the back of the room, tiny little man said, wait, perhaps I can help. It was the man everybody called the demon, coming to Dot's aid, coming to her rescue. He started coming closer towards the pyramid, and as he approached, the other people standing around said, oh, that's him! Run for your lives! And when Dot turned around, they had all vanished. And also by that point, this man was right in front of her, and he said, well, looks like your trial's been postponed. How about a Diet Coke at my place? The next thing Dot knew, she was back in the main ventilation shaft, and she was surrounded by her team members from there. They said to her, Dot, where have you been? What's been going on? Well, she said, well, tell me what you've been doing. They said, well, we're working on a plan to rescue you, and we figured out what all the messages mean. They said, for instance, K not equal to, with AU with the equals crossed out, think milk instead. That means knowledge is not like gold. It's more like milk. If you don't use it, it'll spoil. It's not any good later. And there were a lot of other messages as well that they figured out. The point is, they came to the realization that what they had been doing was calling him a demon and believing in ghosts, because they did not want to face their own fears. Their fear was about change, and they did not want to face that. So they just made these characters, the demon up, so that they could avoid it. When they finally started talking to each other, they realized they could work together as a team, and they could share knowledge. They could be together. So it's finally time for Dot to go back to the real conference room. She started thinking about what she's going to say when she gets there. Ooh, a light bulb went off. I could tell them a story. A powerful story. That's what moved the people in the ventilation shaft to start thinking differently. And she thought, wow, do I ever have a story to tell? Now she knew she could go back to the main conglomerate confident that she could face those six-figure types, that she definitely had something to contribute. Now, let's switch gears, and I'm going to tell you about a real example that took place. This happened well, I should tell you, Daniel Kim was a doctoral student at MIT, and he had been given this big job to go to this huge car company and help them with systems thinking, mental models, and coming up with some new methods so that they could become more of a learning organization. He went there to help them improve the cost and the time it took for them to produce cars. They had $1 billion to work with. They had 5 years to spend on it, and there was 1,000 engineers that were working on this. These 1,000 engineers formed a lot of subspecialty teams, and each team had their own aspect of the new car design that they were working on. What happened was that they were under a lot of time pressure. Every time they reached a problem, each sub-team could either solve the problem with a quick fix or go for a more fundamental solution. Of course, they went for the quick fix. The problem is that caused side effects. And I'll give you an example. The vibration team, what they did is that they would add structural reinforcements to try to add sturdiness to the car. The only problem is, then the chassis team got it, saw it, and realized that added extra weight. Well, they had to remove the weight, but then to make the car stable, they put more air in the tire, make more tire pressure. And then that really made the harshness team just angry, really angry, because they had added harshness. One day, several of these sub-teams got together and said, well, what we need to do is create a map, so a diagram that was, it's called a systems map or a diagram, so we can see what's going on here, because we keep missing our deadlines. They created a map, something like this. Then they had this huge assembly with all the sub-teams were present, all the whole group. They were looking at this systems map. They knew the problems that they were dealing with. They dealt with it on a day-to-day basis. It was foremost in their mind. And yet, they just were still kind of stuck until that moment in the meeting when way far in the back of the room, there was one of the engineers that spoke, and he said, "My God, look what we're doing to each other." The key word here was we. When he said that and the others agreed, this was profound because it meant that they were stopping blaming the other teams or their boss or the time pressure. Instead, they decided that they were going to collaborate, actually, and work together. They had a whole new attitude from that day forward. The result of this is that they finished the project a year ahead of schedule, and they were able to give back $63 million. You cannot share knowledge unless first you see the big picture. You have to see that big picture. This was important and was true in the imaginary team in the ventilation shaft, and it was also true in the situation of these car teams that worked together to create a new car. In both of these cases, the activity that made the difference was sharing knowledge. The greatest good you can do for another is not just to share your riches, to reveal to him his own. Benjamin Disraeli said that. It's important that you share knowledge when you work on a team. It's also beneficial to the actual individual as well. It seems like a paradox. Sharing knowledge. It's not just, it seems like it wouldn't help you. It would diminish your power, but instead it gives you more power. You, as an individual, can take the lead in sharing knowledge.